Welcome to the History of North America. I'm Mark Vinette. Located between the New England Colonies and the Southern Colonies, the Middle Colonies of North America is an area that now roughly makes up the mid-Atlantic American states, including New Jersey. Let's travel back with Eric Yanis of the Other States of America podcast to learn more about this remarkable time in North American history.
New Netherland was taken over in 1664 by the English and given to the Duke of York, the little brother of King Charles II, and became a place you might have heard of called New York. The town of Beverwyck became Albany, New York. The city of New Amsterdam became New York City. And the bottom chunk of what was New Netherland was given away to two prominent supporters of the royal family, who supported them through the tough times, the Civil War, and the Commonwealth period. And as reward, they would be granted a large chunk of land. The English sources from the time call this area Albion, or Albania. Vaguely, this area is renamed New Jersey. And why that name? Well, that's because the land was being given to Lord Berkeley and Lord Carteret. And Lord Carteret had been the governor of the Isle of Jersey. And Lord Berkeley himself gained a bit of a claim for his defense of the Isle of Jersey some decades before. The gifting of this land, of course, would be shocking news to the new English governor of New York, one Governor Nichols, who had spent his time confirming land purchases by various English groups moving into the area that would now become the colony of New Jersey. And so it came as quite a shock in August of 1665 when a man named Philip Carteret arrived in New York City. A cousin of Lord Carteret, of course, the Lords Berkeley and Carteret had appointed Philip Carteret to become the new governor of New Jersey. Now, Governor Nichols immediately took issue with this. The Duke of York, of course, could sell or give away any of the land within his own proprietary colony, just like you could dispense with any property that you have, real estate or other. But Governor Nichols argued that the Duke of York, in fact, did not have the right to give someone else the ability to form an English government. The power of governance came from the king himself, not the king's brother. And thus begins the long struggle between New York and New Jersey, wherein New York is constantly trying to delegitimize the government of New Jersey and future East New Jersey and future West New Jersey. In any form of New Jersey, for that matter, it's going to be very difficult to maintain any sort of governance when you have your own English neighbors denying your legal existence. Not to mention, just to set the scene, just because New Netherland was taken over and New Sweden was taken over doesn't mean the people went home. Very few people did, because their rights and privileges were mostly maintained by the invading English authorities. But that meant that both New York and New Jersey had large populations that were not English. And in fact, many English people who had moved there before the English takeover, they weren't terribly loyal to English authorities. So even your English are not politically terribly English. And the rest of the European population is Dutch, Swedish, Finnish, French Huguenots, and a smattering of other continental European groups. Now, many of the native groups really didn't have too much exposure or loyalty, for that matter, to the English. If we go to upstate New York, for instance, the Iroquois, or the Haudenosaunee, conducted most of their communication through a cabal, or a syndicate of Dutch traders whose families had long since nurtured relationships with the Mohawk Nation. Down in lower New York on Long Island, especially on the eastern portion of Long Island, the settlements there had long been mostly independent, and there was a short bid by a man named John Scott to make Long Island into its own colony. But New York's woes would pale in comparison to those of the proprietary government of New Jersey. Now, a proprietary government is when the proprietor, so the owner of the land, the landlord, is also vested with the power to govern, which the Lords Berkeley and Carteret would insist that they have, despite what the governor of New York says. These two lords published a document called the Concessions and Agreements, which was a constitution of sorts and a vague Bill of Rights applying to the settlers who would decide to live within their New Jersey colony. The document is very similar to a concessions and agreements document that the Carolina colony developed, of which Berkeley and Carteret were also proprietors. In the New Jersey document, there were some very liberal terms. Each family would receive 150 acres, an additional 150 acres for each male indentured servant, 75 more acres for each female indentured servant or enslaved person. And those extra 75 for the indentured servants would, of course, be given to the servant at the end of their term. Until then, it was the property of their master. Settlers would be given a 5-year grace period before they would have to start paying a quit rent. A modern equivalent would be property tax. You have 5 years of tax-free living ahead of you, which meant that in the short term, Governor Carteret wouldn't have to worry about too much internal strife, because he's not really asking too much of the civilian population filling in his cousin's colony. And so the various Quakers, Dutch, Swedes, New Englanders, and Finns, they tolerated Governor Carteret at least for a little while, even though New York and its governor questioned the very existence of a colony of New Jersey. Governor Nichols would be spending the year 1667 writing back home in order to get a little clarification on the status of New Jersey. Does it exist at all? Is it just part of New York? How is it possible that the Duke of York can bestow governing powers beyond those already delegated from his brother? And the New York governor's hardline stance against the legitimacy of New Jersey had its effect on those settlers who had their land purchases confirmed by New York before the New Jersey governor rolled in. This would include the settlers of the Monmouth Patent, which at the time comprised of the cities of Shrewsbury and Middletown. In 1667, those two locales created their own assembly, and they refused to recognize the authority of the proprietors and their appointed governor. Rolling into the year 1668, other parts of New Jersey, especially in eastern New Jersey, reject the authority of Governor Carteret. Surprisingly, it was the English towns that were springing up in East Jersey that were the most vocal in their disdain for Governor Carteret and the proprietors. And as we move closer to that date where the quit rents would start to become due, the dissent only gets worse. The governor of New York just lapping all of this up, thinking that he's making his own colony stronger, the Duke's colony stronger, following a series of scandals back in merry old England. In 1669, both Lord Berkeley and Carteret lose much of their political clout. The Wolves, of course, pounce and try to have their patent to New Jersey rescinded, which brings us very quickly into the year 1670, when Governor Philip Carteret is supposed to collect the first of these quit rents. Not only did many of the settlers refuse to pay them, the settlers who had their land confirmed by the governor of New York, Governor Nichols, they didn't even register their land claims with the New Jersey government. They're not on the rolls. And in November of 1671, the New Jersey General Assembly, that is the assembly that was recognized by Governor Carteret, finally found the towns of Shrewsbury and Middletown in contempt against lawful authority for the inability of the governor to collect taxes there. You think bringing down the hammer of justice in the cold November of 1671 would have done the trick. It did not. Moving into 1672, these two towns being in contempt and yet really facing no consequence only encouraged towns throughout New Jersey to have unauthorized assemblies. And this emerging rival government, in order to possibly gain some air of legitimacy, elected a man by the name of James Carteret to be their governor of New Jersey. Now, James Carteret was the illegitimate son of Lord Carteret. Yes, you heard me right. They're going to use an illegitimate son to give themselves legitimacy. James sets himself up as governor in defiance of his cousin. Now, at this point, we could have a real head-to-head. Governor Carteret against Governor Carteret. But Philip Carteret, not looking for a fight, decides to get on a boat and he leaves for England in order to secure the paperwork necessary to show everyone, people of New Jersey, the governor of New York, that he in fact is the legitimate governor of New Jersey. And maybe doing a little tattletaling to the Lord Carteret about what his oopsie child is up to in the New World. And honestly, it seems like he just doesn't want to go back, because throughout the entire year of 1673, doesn't make an appearance. But preceding him were the requested documents explaining the situation, outlining who the governor is, and demanding that the new governor of New York, no longer Nichols, Governor Lovelace, aid his neighbor, Governor Philip Carteret, any way he can. But Governor Lovelace of New York was not terribly worried about ensuring the Lord Berkeley and Carteret's holdings in the New World. And he really didn't want to expend the resources to prop up a different colonial government, because in the preceding June, Governor Lovelace received information that a war had broken out between England and the Netherlands.
I'm Mark Vinette, and I hope you're enjoying the ride.